Hello and welcome. Today, we are looking into a very disturbing case of David Fuller, also known as the Morgue Monster. David Fuller, born 4th of September 1954, is an engineer, convicted English murderer, and necrophile. David is a father of 4 who lived in a quiet cul-de-sac in Heathfield, East Sussex. Fuller worked in electrical maintenance at hospitals since 1989 and was at the Kent and Sussex Hospital until it closed in September 2011. Fuller was married 3 times. He was interested in birdwatching, cycling, and photography. He was an unofficial photographer for London rock band Cutting Crew, and in 1985 accompanied them on tour with his second wife.
Morning. David, it's the police. Hello. So we need to come and speak to you.
Oh, yes.
Are you here alone?
No.
Okay. She's asleep, is she?
Yeah, it's just getting up to it for her.
Okay. There's a few. David, if you listen to what I'm going to say.
Yes.
Just, we're from Kent Police and we're investigating the murders of Wendy Knell and Caroline Pierce in 1987. Okay? As part of that investigation, you've been linked as a suspect, both geographically and forensically. Okay, if you listen to what my colleague's going to say to you.
Right, David, you're under arrest on suspicion of the murders of Wendy Knell and Caroline Pierce in 1987. Do you understand?
Yes.
You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention, when questioned, something which you later on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. You are being arrested to secure and preserve evidence by means of questioning, so we can conduct searches, so forensic samples can be obtained, and to prevent your disappearance. Do you understand?
In 1987, Wendy Knell and Caroline Pierce were in their 20s and building lives for themselves. They did not know each other, but each had a job and friends, and had found bedsides in Tunbridge Wells in Kent, a lively town at the time, despite its staid reputation. Then the pairs crossed paths with David Fuller. David first met Wendy Knell at the Super Snaps store where she was the manager. He often took in his photographs to be developed there. Wendy Knell, 25, had moved into a bedside after the failure of her marriage. Julie Monks, a friend at the time, believes the breakup came as a blow, describing Wendy as independent and hardworking, but set on having children and making a home. Wendy had just finished working the night of the 22nd of June, 1987. Her boyfriend had dropped her home. The following day, her naked body was discovered, her blood covering the bed on which she lay. Ms. Knell's body showed signs of blunt force trauma to the head, asphyxiation to the neck, and sexual assault after her death. Neighbors had heard nothing through the thin walls of the bedsides, but she had been battered, sexually assaulted, and strangled. Caroline Pierce was killed 5 months later inside her home in Grosvenor Park on November 24th of the same year. Neighbors described hearing screams from Miss Pierce's flat on the night in question, before she was then reported missing, and there was no sign of her in her flat. Her naked body was later discovered 40 miles away, in a water-filled dike at Est Mary in the Marsh on December 15, 1987. David was never convicted of these murders until 34 years later. For 3 decades, David Fuller walked the streets with a swagger in his step, thinking he had got away with some of the most horrific offenses in British criminal history. The deviant hospital electrician, who believed he was untouchable, was convinced he would never serve justice for 2 murders and the sexual assault of at least 100 corpses. But the father of 4 hadn't counted on a chilling coincidence, finally nailing him. Cold case detectives carried out a review of the National DNA database, and that finally proved to be his undoing. He was convicted of what became known as the Bedsit murders after police linked crime scene DNA. Checks showed a close match to 90 people, which detectives were able to whittle down, eventually identifying Fuller's brother, leading them to the necrophiliac's door. But he finally twisted the knife himself. Detectives found that his brother's DNA partially matched samples taken in 1987. It was a 1 billion to 1 match. Following his arrest, he was found to match a bloody fingerprint on a millets bag found in Wendy's bed. Detectives then worked with Clark's footwear archivists to identify a footprint in blood as belonging to one of his trainers. Pictures in his family album showed him wearing the Sports Streak shoes during the 70s and 80s. However, the archives of abuse he kept at his home would prove beyond all doubt his stomach-churning crimes. When the force called on him at his home in Heathfield, East Sussex, he at first denied knowing the 2 women. But during a search of his house, detectives found hidden computer hard drives, CDs, and floppy disks with more than 14 million images of sex offenses. Duncan Atkinson Q, prosecuting, said that evidence found during a search of Fuller's home showed that he had taken images of women's corpses in the mortuaries of Kent and Sussex Hospital and Tunbridge Wells Hospital. 2 of the drives were hidden in a box, which was screwed to the back of a chest of drawers and placed inside a wardrobe. On these drives, officers found footage Fuller had recorded of himself abusing corpses in the morgues. They also found handwritten diaries in which Fuller had written details of his hospital victims, who ranged from a girl aged 9 to a 100-year-old woman. Between 2008 and 2020, Fuller had filmed and photographed himself sexually abusing the bodies of dozens of women and girls. Fuller's victims, some of whom the 68-year-old violated more than once, included 3 who were under 18 at the time of death. Several others were said to be over 85 years old. He then used mortuary records to log their details in his own notebooks, and even looked up some of his victims on Facebook.
David Fuller had a swipe card for the mortuary because he sometimes needed to do maintenance work there. He knew that staff went home at 4 p.m. Porters might still visit the receiving area, delivering bodies, but the same fridges had doors opening onto the post-mortem area where Fuller committed his crimes. Here there was no CCTV until recently, and the fridge doors were unlocked. Fuller gained access through the utility rooms, avoiding cameras, but he still needed to swipe in.
I am admitting the offences, but I don't really want to go into detail.
Yeah. Okay.
If you appreciate that.
And what offences are you admitting, David?
As you've just described to me.
Okay. In terms of the sexual penetration of
Yes.
corpses? Okay. And do you know how many occasions, David?
No.
No. Have you been recording yourself doing those things? Recording yourself sexually penetrating the corpses?
I admit that offences.
Yeah. Okay. What did you...
David was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order on 15th December 2021, meaning that he will serve his life sentence without the possibility of parole. In October 2022, Fuller was charged with an additional 16 offences committed at mortuaries in the now-closed Kent and Sussex Hospital and its successor, the Tunbridge Wells Hospital at Pembury, between 2007 and 2020, and pleaded guilty to the charges on 3rd November 2020. He is imprisoned at Hemp Frankland, alongside other prisoners such as Wayne Couzens and Michael Stone.